Throughout the course of this war, the use of drones has truly been a paradigm shift. We're seeing how Ukraine is able to use very inexpensive drones to destroy Russian oil refineries across the country. And it's not just destroying refineries, it's destroying the Russian economy. But more than that, it is attacking the logistics of the Russian military. It's attacking the security that people felt inside of Russia. And with that, it is changing how the Russian population views this war. Before, the Russian population thought this as something foreign, something far from them. But now, airports are closing for days or even weeks. And it's not only because the drones are flying around, but because of the explosions that they create. Look what we see going on in Crimea. Regularly, Ukraine is carrying out attacks, and these attacks are reducing Russia's ability to protect the peninsula, to keep the Ukrainians out. Now, will this work or will it not? Well, let's consider this. Ukraine's attacks, if we look at them week after week, month after month, are becoming more successful. And with that, the Russians are becoming more afraid. So, what should we make of the Russians' threats? What should we make, though, of their threat that they could start a nuclear war? Is that realistic? Should we worry what former President Dmitry Medvedev says? Well, let's consider this. Russia is losing, and things are about to get worse. And here is what's really going to happen. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post here in Kiev, Ukraine. And more than that, I'm a national security consultant. So what we see going on right now in Russia is fascinating. It's truly very interesting. And what the Russians threaten and what the Russians will do are clearly two different things. And for those people becoming alarmed or scared, that it is an escalation for the Ukrainians to strike back, to strike within Russia, or to attack safe havens within the Crimean Peninsula. You should be relaxed. It'll be okay. Because the reality is this. The Putin regime right now is destabilized, and it is getting worse. But let's look specifically at what that would look like. What is Russia likely to do? How can they realistically respond to Ukraine's ongoing war against them? And don't forget this. There's something else going on inside of Russia which is worth remembering always. It's not just the Ukrainians that they have to fight. The Kremlin today is also fighting groups, insurgents within Russia, such as Atesh, which are trying to violently overthrow the Putin regime. They've been seen to set up lots of different fires and sabotage across the country. They're attacking the railways, they're attacking military bases. And all of this is contributing to the situation that we see rapidly worsening inside of Russia. Between the drones, between the sabotage, the Putin regime is truly on the ropes. So Ukraine's attacks are contributing to a greater picture, a bigger movement. And that movement is one against the Kremlin elite. Now, there's something else that adds to the situation, that makes the situation even more complex. And that is that today, we see that the FSB, which is the intelligence service of Russia, it is going after the Russian military. It's arrested plenty of Russian generals in the past few months. In fact, it arrested 6 times more generals after the full-scale invasion began than it did before the full-scale invasion. Now, in all those cases, as we've discussed, it was somehow tied to corruption. And the size of the bribes were quite large, many times as well over $1 million. So why are they doing that? What's this really mean? Well, they're doing that so that they would have compromised material, compromat, against their opponents in the military. That allows them to then consolidate their control. The FSB would like to control the military. But more than just the military, they want to control the finances of the military. They want to have the contracts. They want to have the control over the ability to decide where money is spent. Because they want it, of course, to be spent on their companies, the companies for which they have fronts. So, looking at all this, how much more realistic today is it that Putin, now stuck in a corner, will lash out? Famously, Vladimir Putin, in his autobiography, which most likely was not actually written with his consent, he says that as a child he remembers chasing down a rat one time in a corridor in St. Petersburg. And as he's chasing down this rat, he got it cornered. And as he went in to stick it with a stick, the rat lunged at him. And he said that he learned a lesson from this. He learned to never corner somebody, Because when someone is cornered, then they'll lash out. This is often cited by people who poorly understand Putin as an example of why Vladimir Putin is likely to use nuclear weapons in the case that he feels cornered. The reality is quite a bit different. Vladimir Putin, when he is cornered, when he is in a difficult situation, such as when Prigozhin started rolling towards Moscow, Vladimir Putin very quickly saw that he didn't have much support. The military didn't stop Prigozhin. We didn't see the police stop him. We didn't see the National Guard stop him. We didn't see the Chechens stop him. We didn't see the border guards stop him. Nobody stopped him. In fact, the people of Russia greeted Prigozhin in the streets like a hero. They brought him food. They brought him wine. He was treated very well. So how did Vladimir Putin respond? Did he call in a tactical nuclear strike on Prigozhin? No, he did not. What Vladimir Putin did was run away, which is what he typically does. So, why would he not use a nuclear weapon? That's a very simple question, and is one that I get quite a bit. So let's look at it from this way. First, nuclear weapons have to present a credible threat. That is, people have to believe that, one, you could use them and would use them, but secondly, that they work. Let's imagine that tomorrow, Vladimir Putin tossed a nuclear weapon in the middle of Kiev, where I am now. What would happen? Well, we're not quite sure. There's a reasonable chance that they are not taking care of these nuclear weapons as they should. Remember the corruption that we discussed within the Russian military. If they're not taking care of them, it might not explode. It might just bounce around the street. And at that point, the credible threat of the Putin regime collapses. His ability to threaten others with some sort of retaliation stops existing. And that will be very dangerous. Less because of the West, and more because of what he really fears, China. According to Russian intelligence, China remains the major threat to their security. And if China realizes that Russia now doesn't have the capacity to respond, how would they use that to their advantage? But there's something else here as well, and this is also important. We have to understand that the nuclear weapons of Russia operate through the military. The military today is on the outs with FSB and on the outs with Vladimir Putin. So knowing that, would they really risk using a nuclear weapon if after the war, either way, they're going to face persecution and prosecution? And if they use a nuke and Russia still loses, they again will face punishment. Wouldn't it be smarter to just not fulfill the order? Most likely the case. Now, I don't agree with others who might argue that Putin would not do it because he would be killed. Because, frankly, the country that would be most likely to kill him, I think in most people's eyes, would be the Americans. But the fact is the Americans wouldn't do it. Because there's an executive order, 1233-3, I think it is. And that is from 1981. Reagan signed it. It was a continuation of the one that had existed under Ford from 1976, if I recall. And that is that we do not assassinate foreign leaders. Why did they have this executive order? Specifically because the U.S. did try to assassinate foreign leaders. In fact, it was quite a popular hobby of the Nixon administration throughout Latin America with Operation Condor and others. But neither here nor there. I digress. Back to Putin and his empty threats. Notice that Vladimir Putin does not actually generate the threats himself. Typically what happens is someone like Dmitry Medvedev, who is a drunk, will go on these rampages about how they can level European capitals, how they have a massive nuclear arsenal, which is true. It's the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. However, we have to understand, Dmitry Medvedev undoubtedly does not write his own tweets. Medvedev undoubtedly is not involved in decision-making on these sorts of things. Medvedev is playing a role. He is a puppet. He's an actor. He's given lines, and he uses them. And in the case of his social media, it's almost certainly not him that's even writing it. It's somebody else that writes it for him. See, his job is to look crazy. That's actually his job. Because then it makes Vladimir Putin look sane. He's not the one that's always using nuclear threats. It's Medvedev. But there's another aspect of this as well. Putin, when he threatens nuclear war and these things, it's usually in a very indirect way. He'll say things like, I worry about the security of our children in the future because anything could happen. Or nuclear weapons would be the worst thing that could happen to our children. Okay, it's a threat, but it's not direct. It's not like Medvedev. The Russians realistically would not use nuclear weapons. There's just too much risk that it simply would not work. If the weapons were to fail, what does Putin do then? There is no other plan. Now, some have asked, what happens if Putin is killed? Couldn't they continue to use the weapons even without him? And that is true. They could actually, because it is not just the president that has control of nuclear weapons. In fact, it is an entire system. Within Russia, the general staff, it can transmit the codes directly to missile crews if political command is severed, which means if the leader is killed or lost or missing. This turns authority into a system's property. It's not a single person's will. It is an entire system. But again, who is that system? That system is a military that's becoming increasingly lost by the Putin regime, a military that realizes the Putin regime is actively working against them. It's not working in their interest. So going ahead, what can we expect? What do we think realistically would happen? Well, first and foremost, Ukraine should absolutely continue more deep strikes inside of Russia and within Crimea. It is the single best thing that can happen today. Following that, the best thing we could do is to make sure that the Russians understand the repercussions for such threats. It has to be made very clear to them what this would result in. Empty threats don't help. Credible threats, they do. And if the U.S. makes it very clear that there would be dramatic repercussions, you can be sure that Russia will not toss the dice. It simply does not have the capacity to do so. It risks too much and would probably gain very, very little. But there's another part of this. What strategic gain is there to use nuclear weapons? What physically would Russia gain? It wouldn't give them any sort of military benefit. It would simply turn the world against them. It would make the situation worse, not better for Russia. This would lead to the countries that have already, it appears, cautioned Russia, such as China, such as India, to tell it, sorry, you've gone too far. And even we have to start boycotting our trade with you. And for Russia, that would collapse their economy. Now, Vladimir Putin is a dictator. And dictators only have one interest. They have only one thing that they care about. And that is their self-interest. It's not their country. It's certainly not their countrymen. It is they themselves. So if you know that this could very well destabilize your regime, you know that this very well could lead to your downfall, would you do it? What do you have to gain? So at the end of the day, the reality is this. Ukraine is doing a great job continuing to carry out attacks within Crimea as well as within mainland Russia. And that is why we'll probably hear more threats coming from the Russians in the near term. And that's exactly why we should tune them out and not take them seriously. The facts speak for themselves. Ukraine is winning. Russia is losing. And after 3.5 years of empty threats, of saber-rattling, the Russians have not used a nuke, and they will not use a nuke. All their threats are just empty words, and we should not give them more credence than that. Thank you for listening. Please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel. Send this video to others and leave your comments below. I'm curious what you think. Do you think that Putin or the Russians would use a nuke? What would they gain from that exactly? As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.